Hello and welcome to this week's Q&A with Stephanie. I'm Stephanie Lillian and I'm so excited for you to be tuning in here today. So today's question is, how do I start an at-home yoga practice? And that is an awesome question, and I'm so excited that you are interested in starting your very own at-home yoga practice. So I have 3 starter tips for you, and then maybe a little note of caution as well. So let's start right now. So the first little note that I have for you, or idea, suggestion, is to create some space. The first thing that we must do when we're approaching something new is to create space for it in our already possibly busy lives. So before you even start to create physical space, create mental space for your yoga practice. Do you truly have the bandwidth, the space in your mind where you can find somewhere in your day that you can plug this practice in? So take some time, even if you just start to think about creating the practice in your day-to-day life, that's the first step. Begin to create this little nook for it within your mind, and then once you begin to culminate that and you find space for it in your mind, find space for it physically. So one of the most powerful things you can do is go throughout your home and say, where am I going to set up this yoga practice? Because if you cannot find the physical space, how are you ever going to take yourself out of your life and put yourself into your practice? So when I first started practicing at home, I was in an apartment in Morristown, New Jersey, and I had this big old green couch, and at the end of the arm of the couch, there was probably about 6 to 8 feet between that and the door, the entranceway of my apartment. And I would set up my mat right there. I had about a foot of space ahead and a foot of space behind between the 2 walls, but that was the space that I was setting up, and it slowly grew to a room with carpeting, and then now I have my own space. But start small. You don't have to have this grand old space, as long as it's enough to set up your yoga mat and you have a little bit of space on each edge. Doesn't matter if it's carpet or not, just set up a space in your home, and maybe you bring in a yoga type picture or some candles or a little altar that you create. But creating the mental and then the physical space is your first step to starting your at-home yoga practice. The next step kind of goes on a tangent from there, which is seeing how this practice is going to fit into your schedule. So similar to space, but now we're getting a little bit more specific. So how many times a week do you really foresee yourself practicing? How are you going to practice? Is it going to be a set routine? Are you going to follow videos online? For how long will you practice in each session? So these are some thoughts that you can begin to ask yourself. The more specific you get, the more likely you are to stick to the goals that you make. From there, you can really begin to visualize this for yourself. So our first step is to create mental and physical space. The second step is to come up with a schedule, even to the point where you say how many days a week, which days, what time of day. Maybe you get super specific. Maybe it's a general, I'm going to practice before I go to work. So whatever it is, get very specific with yourself. All right, so our third factor in determining or starting your yoga practice at home is, what is your why? So this one is the one that I would almost emphasize more so than the other two, is why are you hoping to start your yoga practice at home? Is it for reasons that might contribute to the physical body? Are you hoping to gain strength? Are you hoping to gain flexibility? What is it? Now, as you begin to work through this question of what's your why, I want to encourage you to really become introspective. I have found throughout my own practice and really working into creating an at-home yoga practice that the more, or the times where I more frequently linked my why to physical results, the practice became more burdensome. It became more stressful, if you will. So I'd like to urge you to maybe approach this from a different point of view. So rather than saying I want to practice yoga because I want to be able to do a forward fold and touch my toes, I want to look a certain way, I want to achieve, I want to weigh 100 pounds, whatever it is, let's try to get outside of the physical world, the physical self. So for example, right now, I practice yoga as a spiritual offering. I look at it as a social responsibility for myself when I go out into the world, because when I practice yoga, it is my time with God. It's time to tune in to my true self. And when I find that I do that daily, if not more, that the Stephanie that I present to the world is a much better version of myself. It's the version that I want to bring into the world. And I'm a true believer that every interaction, every interaction that we have with one another, whether it's a simple glance of the eye or a true conversation, the energy that we have, that we exchange between one another, gets passed on. And I like to have the visual as almost like I'm holding a candle, and everybody that I touch their lives throughout the day, just even if it's hardly an interaction, that flame gets passed on and it grows to a network because they interact with all these people and those people interact with all these people, and it grows. And if I'm out there passing on my negative energy, my worries, my doubts, my anger, whatever it is, to others, that ripple effect goes throughout the world, and it ends up touching hundreds of people that you may never even know, as someone makes a phone call to somebody else throughout the day, and that energy ripples on. So if I'm going to go out into the world or have any sort of interactions with anybody, I want that to be a beautiful light of love that I pass on, inspiration. I want to help people get plugged back into their true selves as well. So whether I'm just saying hi to somebody while I'm walking my dogs, that they get that feeling from me, and that's what passes on throughout the world. So I practice yoga as a social responsibility, as a spiritual offering. So I'd love to emphasize to you, and I know I'm spending a lot of time on this point because I think it's truly important, because when we look at yoga, a lot of the times we see just all these acrobatic postures, all these girls in these tiny clothes that look super pretty doing all these flexible things, and it's more of acrobatics, but that at that point is acrobatics. Yoga is so much deeper than that. It truly is a spiritual journey, and in spiritual journeys, we need to let go of really striving towards anything and participate in the practices and the activities for the joy of practicing, for the joy of just being there, rather than trying to practice because we're achieving something. So take a look at your why. If you truly do find that yoga brings you to the center and it allows you to come to your true self, then that's enough of a reason to practice. That's the energy that you bring out into the world, and everything else will come from it. So again, take some time, cultivate a why, and I truly have found in my own practice that the more heartfelt and centered those whys are, the more likely you are going to show up. And on that note, I do want to add a little extra note with regards to those three kind of tips. So more than anything, please, please, please practice self-compassion. Yoga is coming home, is coming to your heart center. You can practice yoga without coming onto your mat and doing the yoga asanas today by loving yourself, by practicing self-compassion, to find love for yourself on where you're at today and what you do in your day-to-day and your life and your struggles and your joys. Love yourself. The more you love yourself and find love for your life, for what it is right now, the more likely you are to take part in activities such as yoga that help promote and cultivate that state. So please, if there's anything that you get out of this video, the first step is practicing self-compassion. Be mindful of the thoughts that you think towards yourself, towards others, and give yourself a little break. It took me many years to get to the point this point where I began to practice every single day. It was not easy, it was a struggle. I knew in the back of my mind that I did want to practice regularly, but it took a while for that thought to come to the forefront of my consciousness and then relate with a reason that really hit home for me. For many years, I would practice, a couple times a day or a couple times a week, if that. Sometimes I would go a week without practicing and my mental state and everything would feel it. But I remember I was listening to a Tony Robbins talk or speech once, and he said, a decision happens in an instance. There we go. So a decision happens in one moment. So in one moment, you decide whether you're going to do something or you're not. While, yes, looking back, there may be a whole slew of things that add up to that decision and that point in time, but truly getting yourself to the point where you decide, I'm doing yoga every day for the rest of my life because it makes me a better person, it plugs me into my true self, and it's the person that I want to present to the world. That happens in an instant. So I encourage you to be compassionate with your journey. It's unfolding as it should, and whether you're practicing 5 minutes a week or you're just simply starting the practice of self-compassion, or maybe you're at the point where you're practicing for a bit of time every day, know that your journey is unfolding exactly as it should. And the moment we begin to let go of our vision and we're competing with what is, we can begin to find peace, and that's yoga. Find love for where you're at today. That's the most important thing that you can do. Be compassionate with yourself and the path you're on and the journey you're taking, and everything will unfold beautifully for you, I truly promise. So once you establish that self-compassion, once you find your beautiful why, the reason you're practicing, the true reason in your heart that you're practicing, then you maybe begin to create space in your mind, create and carve out a little space in your home for your practice. And when I say your practice, I'm talking the physical asana practice, the yoga postures. And then from there, you begin to culminate the idea of the schedule. And when you come up with your idea of your schedule and you have this plan, again, be compassionate with yourself. What will you do if you miss a day? How can you find love for the days that maybe don't go as planned? Find a soft, easy heart for yourself. Love yourself for where you're at today. On that note, I hope you have a beautiful and wonderful week, and I will see you next week. Namaste.